Hello?
Hello.
Hi, is this Jerry Alexander?
It is.
All right, sir. Nicholas Woodall, I apologize. My computer's still loading up.
Are you in Indiana or are you in Kentucky?
Indiana.
Okay. So do you live in
Indiana? But not anymore, sir.
So you're actually living in Kentucky?
No, I don't know.
You have a Kentucky phone number. That's why I was asking.
No, sir. The phone number is Texas.
Texas? Okay.
Yes, but I'm not in Texas anymore. I'm actually in Arizona.
Arizona. Okay. Are you living in Arizona or?
At the time, yes.
Okay. So do you have a residence in the state of Indiana?
Not currently, no.
Okay. Well, then you would need to contact a legislative person from Arizona. You contacted a U.S. Senator representing the state of Indiana.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that, sir.
Okay.
I am aware of that, but again, hopefully this computer will load up. Let's try to figure this out. So this issue is happening nationwide, right? I mean,
I don't know whether the issue is happening. When I read your email, I'm trying to make some sense out of it, and what I'm reading is that you're trying to create a fairness issue that a person who commits a crime and does not know the ramifications of committing that crime because that person doesn't have an educational understanding.
No, you totally misunderstood that. I don't know if you guys had a CIA hacking issue, or if you had, or what the situation happened with. Maybe there was something on my end. Maybe there's something in between. But what's being asked is that states and federal jurisdictions be required to educate simply into the interactions that happen between law enforcement and citizens, and also provide a minimal amount of information to outline. So here's what would happen. The federal government would outline and say, this is where you find, and this is what states need and federal jurisdictions must provide to citizens to comply with this law. And the law would state that they would need to create educational materials for interactions with law enforcement, and also need to create a specific response. So if someone calls in to, let's say they call the police department and they say, where do I find Indiana state laws? Where do I find Indianapolis laws? It would be a law requiring the state to ensure that law enforcers are educated into, to say, you go to indianapolis.gov, and you'll find your specific titles there. Or you go to
the state of Indiana does, any criminal activity that is involved, a court-involved person for a criminal act,
but we're not talking about the state of Indiana, sir. What we're stating is that from Alabama to Washington and everywhere in between, be required to have a set fixed standards. So you see the stuff that happens in Chicago. There's stuff that happens, and these are sporadic issues, but it's not necessarily the issue that we see. It's the issues that we don't see, and the resulting unrest around it. So here's what happens. During the pandemic from 2014 and occasions before, young children, young people have had interactions with law enforcement, and they're usually poor kids. The result is they usually run from police. They usually evade arrest. Citizens are confused and believe, or simply they're criminals. Doesn't really matter. But what is being, but the result is someone gets hurt. They say, "Oh, the police were wrong. The police were wrong. No, the citizens were wrong. The citizens was wrong. You guys are wrong." What the result is civil unrest. So this is aimed at saying common law, in our country rose from moral law, which started all the way back in the 1600s when the founding fathers, were drafting up the legislation. They said, these are the rules that we have in place from English common law that's already here. They never really addressed the situation of ensuring, you say ignorance of the law does not equate to innocence, but it also doesn't equate to, that's not to say that a person isn't wrong for doing something that's morally wrong. What it does say is that educating into the rights and responsibilities that citizens have, specifically when interactions with law enforcement occur, is just simply a way to say that if you're not aware of where to find the laws that govern you, if you haven't been formally introduced to this information, if you haven't been formally introduced to what your rights are as a citizen, what your responsibilities are as a citizen, have you been fairly introduced into American society? Can you properly function as an American citizen? And I would say that the resulting riots and the resulting unrest, damaging, property and so on and so forth, is people saying that, no, it's not fair for the government to impose, these unfair situations upon citizens when it's simply an issue of saying, why don't we just require the states? And this is something that I've reached out to a lot of different groups on, and, to be honest, these people, they all have different opinions and different views. A lot of them seem more individual focused. They don't really, nobody's coming out and saying, this is how we find a solution. Everyone's saying, this is what we want. Everybody just wants justice. Everybody just, so going around it and saying this or that or this or that, I think, can you hold on a second?
No,
Look, sir. We have a serious failure of communication right here. So what you're telling me is, state what you said. Simply, you say, Mike Braun's office does not believe that
Senator Braun's office believes in the separation of federal versus state. The local implementation of local laws is up to the local government and the individual state to enforcement of laws, whether it includes education or whether it includes the Miranda rights of an individual that's being arrested. That person has certain rights the Miranda rights comes from the federal government. But for a civil individual, a police officer primarily that is arresting a citizen for a crime, for that police officer to have to spend the time to educate a person on the ramifications of that crime.
See, you're taking this into a whole different area. We're not asking police to do any types of education. What this would be to have legislators sit down per state, So when it says, here you are, I am, I'm working for Senator Braun of Indiana. We're drafting up legislation, and in this legislation, we're going to say the American citizen has the right to be formally informed of where to find information regarding the laws that govern them. That means that states are required to, when asked, please, sir, let me finish, when asked, provide a specific response. Indiana.gov/Title I.
Well, I tell you what,
additionally, at a specific point or juncture, whether it be, ninth grade, or it be when a person gets their driver's license, that they be formally introduced to what their responsibilities and rights are in regards to the law, and whether that mean interactions with others or interactions with law enforcement, as well as where to find that law information. So that would mean to say that we're drafting this legislation for the United States of America to say that all states and federal jurisdictions are required to, when a person receives a driver's license or at the age of 12 or 13 years old, when they get an identification card, that they, this would obviously be something that the committee would need to decide, so on and so forth. What would happen is, at the time of this age, a person would be provided certain information that the state is required to provide a person, an American citizen, this specific information. That information being an outline of what their rights and responsibilities are when interactions with law enforcement occur. It could be as simple as a short pamphlet that says you have the responsibility to comply if an officer says stop. If an officer decides that there is probable cause to search you, you have to comply. You have the right to refuse. However, an officer may receive a warrant. You're still under that responsibility to stay in place while they search for that warrant, to search you or your person or your vehicle or your home. This would also be to say that if you resist arrest, an officer or a person of law enforcement authority has the right to use force, and that measure of force will escalate if you resist further upon resisting, and it could result in use of deadly force. That would also be to say that in interactions with law enforcement, you also have certain rights, and those certain rights are going to vary from state to state, but there's going to be a minimum amount of rights, such as rights of due process. Now, whether this office believes this is something that has been back and forth in the Supreme Court, what is the definition of due process? And when I spoke earlier and said, give me a second. When I spoke earlier and said, the founding fathers were all educated, very, very well educated peoples. They all came from fairly wealthy families, and many of them had law education degrees, some of them from Europe. At the time of the creation of America, education, when the Constitution was drafted, when the Bill of Rights was drafted, people were still being educated mostly in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, by the churches. There were mandatory churches, and those churches had mandatory Sabbath laws, so everybody went to church on Sunday. And in return, they were educated. They were taught how to read so that they could read Scripture, and they were also taught some other information. I'm still trying to find that. But as a result, what is considered common law was taught to the people, you know, in an all-encompassing way. Most people, if they were complying with Sabbath laws, were also being educated into the moral law that is the foundation of our country, and that moral law being, you know, the Ten Commandments, Exodus, you know, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. I don't think there's laws in Exodus, and I'm not sure if there's. But anyway, sir. Right. Yeah.
Exodus has the Ten Commandments, so I'm sure that would be law. You know, honestly, I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's to.
So the concept of common law.
The government passes law every month. There's new laws being passed that affect every person in the United States, and the you know, the idea that ignorance of the law is not an excuse, and that is true.
I'm not arguing that, sir. But no, sir. I don't think that would be. Look, again, like I said, our laws were based on moral law. To simply say, is this right? Is this wrong? What is the measure? You know, so, you know, is this 10 lashes, or is this an issue of adultery where you hang someone from a tree? That has evolved, you know, a long ways from old church law, and that is, you know, but what I'm saying is that persons, you know, this isn't the 1960s where people are, you know, where minorities are being just introduced to equality, the right to use bathrooms and public libraries where you would find, or law libraries where you would find law books. This is to say simply that states and federal jurisdictions, in the case of federal jurisdictions, it would simply be, you know, I guess that could be fulfilled in a simple way, but let's just focus on states. That's the majority of the people who are imprisoned, you know, the 3 million people who are in prison approximately, or who've gone through the prison system, are on paroles and probations. Those 3 to, I think it's probably around 15 million. But those people would simply be, all people would be introduced only to where they find the law, informed that it's their responsibility to be aware of these laws, and also that states would be required to not only inform people of where these laws are by providing this information at driver's license, when a person receives their driver's license, or when they get into 9th grade, or maybe even earlier. You know, this could possibly be a good deterrent towards, you know, people seeing options of crime as a means for survival and benefiting. You know, if you look at cost versus loss, obviously if you go to prison for a year for something that's only going to feed you for a week or a month or less, a young kid may reconsider, you know, when looking at the other options. But to get back to it, this would say that it would simply be to say that states would be required to provide this information, the minimum, introduce where to find the laws, say it's your responsibility to know the laws, and these are your rights and responsibilities when interactions with law enforcement occur, as well as the rights and responsibilities of law enforcers. Law enforcers have the right to defend themselves just like, you know, a citizen does. So if they're in a situation where you resist arrest, well, in those situations, they have the right to defend themselves, and that would result in use of force, and so on and so forth. Now, this isn't an issue where the statistics I last read, I think there's 60,000 instances of, or sorry, 60 million instances of crime reported each year. That's assault, that's fraud, that's theft, that's illegal immigration, that's a lot of drug use, a lot of DUIs, things like that. All of that is interactions with law enforcement. So this would be to say that, when state law enforcers perform their duties, that people have been informed when they got that driver's license or when they went to school of those interactions, to say that a law enforcer will hand you information into victims' rights. It's literally, it's 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes of reading, or it's a pamphlet that you hand to someone with the test and they hand it back, or they keep it. It could also be more complex to be videos. If the state wants to create a video to show how a proper interaction should occur, as opposed to an improper interaction where someone is resisting, arrest or saying, you can't search my vehicle, you don't have the right to do that. And they're saying, well, then hold on a second. I have the warrant, and they're still saying, no, you don't have the right to search. Well, this is the warrant. Again, it's not a real complex issue, but the result of, and honestly, I don't think that major news has done a good job. They did the job. They showed, they say, hey, look, we got riots happening here, we got riots happening there, people are marching here, people are marching there. This resulting as unrest has resulted in, this amount of financial loss, this inconvenience to people, and that is what the goal is to fix. It's also to say that even though our nation was founded on the concept of common law, it doesn't mean that we can't improve and say that instead of just saying our laws are our rules of common law, it would also mean that we formally introduce people to the law. And so that would be a more fair way of governing, to say that you have been informed of the rules of the game, you have been informed of the laws that govern over you, in theory, before they are imposed upon you. Now,
let me cut this, kind of cut this to the chase here. I've got to move on to another call, and this is, the state of Indiana. I know how that works because I'm from the state of Indiana. If a person has a question about the law, it's on the internet. The state statutes is all on the internet. A person could do just what you suggested. Go to
understood, Indiana, but the issue is that from Alabama to Washington, sir, I understand that it's online. Most states have their laws online, but that's not the issue. The issue is, you with me, sir? Hello? Jerry?